Hello, thank you for watching this early February 2018 weather update for Farm Credit Illinois. My name is Eric Snodgrass, and I am Senior Atmospheric Scientist and co-founder of Agrible Incorporated, and I also serve as the Director for Undergraduate Studies in Atmospheric Sciences at the University of Illinois. Well, what a difference a year makes. Check this out. This is looking at the 2017-18 winter total snowfall. When you look across this map here, we can see that compared to last year, a lot of the Corn Belt and certainly a lot of Illinois is certainly doing a lot better on snowfall than we were a year ago at this time. And it's kind of interesting to kind of see why. Check out these two maps. On the top, I'm looking at December and January of 2016-17 temperature anomalies. And on the bottom, it's December 2017 through January 2018 temperature anomalies. So basically last winter versus this winter. Some of the big shifts that we saw this year was a complete change in the flow of the jet stream. Last year, we had a what we call zonal flow to the jet stream. Really didn't have too many big ridges and troughs. It kind of came right on the west coast, soaking the west coast, keeping the northwest cool, while much of the eastern two-thirds of the country were quite warm. In contrast, the last 60 days, so basically December and January of 2017-18, huge ridge out west was a permanent feature. That's why the west has been quite warm so far this winter. And California, unlike last winter, has been quite dry. While that trough plunges deeply across the eastern half of the country, we've seen a lot of days at the end of December, especially in the first 3 weeks of January, where it was quite cold across the state of Illinois. Elsewhere, just to kind of bring a couple of things to your attention, in the state we do quite a bit of wheat farming, and so if we just kind of take a look elsewhere around the world that we need to be concerned about in terms of wheat, I want to show you a couple of things here. Look near the Black Sea this year. We've seen that December and January of this winter been very warm. This area's also been very wet, so they've had a much different winter this winter than they did last winter, where it was much, much cooler on average for that same area. So that could be setting them up for some potential stresses with a late frost event that could cause some problems with the quality of their wheat crop. So at least something else to look there globally at as we kind of transition into our forecast. Now, the important thing about the forecast is to see where we've been recently with precipitation. So check this out. Last 60 days of precipitation expressed as a percent of normal. Now, when you look across the state of Illinois, we've had most regions across the state being somewhere between 60 and 100% of average on total precipitation. Remember, this is our drier time period throughout the year, so we got to just take a look at this and kind of keep it in the back of our minds, because as we move into spring, we could very easily erase this deficit we've got going right now. Where it's been extremely dry, and this is what we have to keep an eye on, is down here in Texas, Oklahoma, and Kansas. There are some regions down here that have not seen precipitation since early October of 2017. And why I want to pay attention to this is because if this drought that's developing here survives, if it survives the month of May, when we have a lot of spring rain, if it's still there, that's cause for concern for the state of Illinois, because drought here has historically spread to the north and to the east. And big time drought that survives spring has a pretty good chance of doing that. So kind of to put a cap on this, take a look at our most recent drought monitor update going right into the month of February. We can clearly see that while Illinois did, we're between 60 and 100% of normal on precip, really the only places that are getting to show up as being extended dry anomalies, those are differences from normal, really kind of come into the southwestern side of the state, and certainly kind of along the Mississippi River Valley. But what I'm concerned about is all the kind of lack of precip here in the south central plains. This is going to be the area to watch as we move into planting season. If this drought survives the month of May, that again is cause for concern. So let's talk about February here. As we move into the month of February, certainly the first 10 days of the month are going to see pretty cold temperatures. We're going to establish a big ridge out west and a plunging trough that's going to go through basically the eastern two-thirds of the country. We got a couple of snow events coming in the first full week and the second full week of February. That's going to go really across the northern part of the state for the most part here, but certainly going to be adding to our snowfall totals. What's interesting, though, is to see where we're transitioning out of February as we get into March and April. So I'm going to give you one perspective of it here and kind of talk a little bit about what I think kind of the overall picture should be. Real quick before we get onto that, though, expect a very active Ohio River Valley storm track as we get through the first half of the month of February and potentially extending toward the end. So this is showing temperatures, but again, we could see quite a bit of precipitation in this area, which would actually be very good for agriculture throughout winter. So let's talk about that March, April, and May time period. I'm showing you basically what comes out of the 8 U.S. global models models and we put all their forecasts together to give us one kind of snapshot here. One of the things we're seeing is that in the same places where it's quite dry, we're also seeing a bit of a warm bias moving into March, April, and May. And what that does is that kind of tends to push the atmosphere. At times, it could favor a better ridging across the central United States. Now, putting all that together, it looks as though we have a higher probability of seeing March with near average temperatures and maybe April with near average temperatures than we would have seen both of those months carrying a cold bias. So right now, that's the current look as we get out into our spring. I'll also say this, for summer, if we continue to see the drier conditions developing in northern Mexico and in the south central plains, that could be an indicator of some ridging across the central part of the country. And right now I'm thinking that the greatest risks for hot and dry conditions for summer of 2018 are really going to be centered over the central plains. But with any summer, if we see that heat slide to the east, even for just a few days or 10 days at the wrong time period in July, that could really hammer on our corn yields. But again, it's pretty far out to kind of be making a judgment call like that at this point. I just want to let you all know it's something that we as meteorologists are watching very, very closely. So this is kind of the bigger picture as we move through the month of February, get into our early spring when we start talking about planting. Again, the biggest concerns, keep a close eye on the drier conditions to the south and west of the state of Illinois. Okay, as we move into the end of this video, let's take a quick trip south of the equator and talk about what's going on in Brazil and Argentina. Now check out this map. What you're looking at here is January 28th, 2018 versus January 28th, 2017, looking from a satellite perspective to kind of give us an idea on the health of the crops down in South America. Now, the bean crop that came out of Brazil is actually going to be fantastic. They expect it to be quite large, although they're going to have a little bit of delay getting that crop out. Plus, remember, they were a little bit delayed putting the crop in. So where the real pressure comes in terms of Brazil agriculture is going to be in the safrinha crop, the second crop, which is typically a corn crop. And so as a consequence, we could see a late planting, which is going to maybe force some of the Brazilian farmers to not plant corn, instead plant cotton, and also potentially stress that cotton crop as it might try to get into grain fill when they get to the end of the Brazilian monsoon. The bigger market story has been what's going on in Argentina. So take a look at the graph a little closer here. We can see that this year, we don't see these colors getting way up in the blues, which indicate very healthy crop throughout the big growing regions in Argentina, whereas a year ago they looked much, much, much better. So there's been some stress in Argentina, and that's going to be our story moving forward. Just to show you how dry it's been, this is kind of getting into the very end of January, beginning of February. Notice that their growing regions down here have been very dry. No major precipitation systems coming through in the last 7 days, getting into the first full week of February. But Brazil, monsoon cranked up, delaying harvest right in through this area. So Argentina dry, Brazil very, very wet. And that's really what we are looking at for the next, kind of the first 10 days, I should say, for the month of February. This is going to continue to delay harvesting efforts here in Mato Grosso, Goiás, Tocantins, this area. And the drier pattern that we're seeing further to the south, because the monsoonal flow is way up here in the northern part of Brazil, may indicate some continued pressure down here in Argentina. So we got a lot kind of going on as we transition out of the Brazilian and Argentinian growing season and into the North American growing season to be watching out for. Certainly some weather stresses on each side of the equator that could cause some concern, especially for that corn crop. Not necessarily beans coming out of Brazil, but certainly corn. And we'll have to keep watching that drought that's in kind of the south central part of the United States as we transition into spring and summer. And with that, I'll wrap this video up. We at Farm Credit Illinois thank you for watching, and I hope you look forward to our next weather updates that are coming out. Thank you.